It has the potential to revolutionize Europe's AI future, but in the midst of all the political drama from the past weeks, I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't heard of it. Officially, it's called the European AI Research Council, but von der Leyen referred to it as the CERN for AI. CERN, of course, being one of the world's largest centers for scientific research. But what is this CERN for AI? Well, for Aaron Maniam, Senior Fellow for Advanced AI at the International Center for Future Generations, this may well represent a watershed moment for Europe.
A CERN-like structure suggests that we are interested in having a clear, accountable, definable entity taking responsibility for AI development. And this is in a lot of ways in stark contrast to the trend of the last 30 years, right, when the EU didn't really participate particularly actively in cutting-edge technological development.
From Friends of Europe, this is Policy Voices. I'm Catarina Vila Nova. If you haven't already, please take a moment now to subscribe to Friends of Europe's podcast wherever you're listening to this now, to never miss an episode of Policy Voices. Today on the show, the future CERN for AI and what it will mean for Europe's digitalization future. I'm joined by Aaron Maniam, Senior Fellow on Advanced AI at the International Center for Future Generations. Aaron also teaches at the Blavatnik School of Government at the University of Oxford and chairs the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on the Future of Technology Policy and OECD's expert group on AI futures. Here's our conversation. Aaron, welcome to Policy Voices. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Catarina. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. We were actually so lucky. We've had this conversation in the books for a while now. And who would have thought that we would match our conversation today with perfect timing that the Commission is finally coming into office. So we're speaking just a few days before the new College of Commissioners is going to start. And we are going to talk about one proposal that I have to say, I think it fell a bit through the cracks of von der Leyen political guidelines for her next commission, what she called the European AI Research Council, similar to CERN. So CERN is, of course, what people know as one of the world's largest centers for scientific research. And so in her political guidelines, she made this proposal to create this specific center just for artificial intelligence. Can you put this announcement in perspective? How significant is it?
I think this is a truly significant and quite watershed moment for Europe, not just because of the constitution of the new council, as you mentioned, but because this proposal that she's mentioned really signifies a few very important things. One, a CERN-like structure, I think, emphasizes the importance of really strong technical and foundational research. It's about giving due regard to scientific expertise. And this is particularly critical for AI because this is not a tech that we understand well. It's a technology that's continually evolving. And so giving due space to expertise and science, I think, is a really critical development. It also underlies the importance of a collaborative and cross-border approach. Because, again, this is not a technology that any single country can tackle alone or even a single region. And you need expertise to come together. You need different sorts of experiences coming together to deal with the complexity and range of what's involved here. And then thirdly, I think this is significant because it emphasizes the importance of political will. A CERN-like structure suggests that we are interested in having a clear, accountable, definable entity taking responsibility for AI development. And this is in a lot of ways in stark contrast to the trend of the last 30 years, right, when the EU didn't really participate particularly actively in cutting-edge technological development, both the development of the foundational technologies as well as the commercialization of those technologies. Examples of this would include things like computer infrastructure, web-based enterprises. But on AI, we have a new chance, right? There's a tabula rasa here that we can work with. And I think if we get the technical, the collaborative, and the political will aspects right, there's a huge amount of potential here. And that's why this proposal is so important, because it brings together these coordinated and rigorous scientific approaches, which will allow us to really turbocharge European science and business, because it brings a certain amount of predictability and reliability for widespread adoption.
So, in a sense, it's Europe's second, third, or fourth chance to finally get it right and stay ahead of the race on all things digital.
You know, the world is complex, right? There's always going to be new chances, I think. But yes, this is a chance, I think, that Europe has to really try and get things right on a particularly significant technology, a technology that is increasingly looking like it will not just be a fad, that it's going to be around for quite a while, and it is going to be life-changing and pervasive in the kind of reach that it has. So it's not just a chance to get things right, it's a chance to get things right on a really big ticket item.
Okay, so no pressure. What would then be the benefits that CERN for AI can bring to the European Union? And I mean, let's dream bigger. What about the world more broadly?
Yeah, I love that you frame this in terms of the world and not just the European Union, because AI is a boundaryless technology, right? And so its benefits are going to be both to the region and to the world. And the more we benefit the world, the more I think Europe will also experience key benefits. I tend to think of the benefits in kind of three broad buckets. One is the economy, both the domestic and the trade economy. I think in terms of safety and security as a second bucket. And then thirdly, our societies, right? And all three of these will experience really important benefits. On the economy, I think what you're getting basically is if AI is a truly trustworthy general purpose technology, and it is increasingly looking like it will be that way, then something like a CERN for AI can really turbocharge the economy. There will be new revenues from selling models in a multi-trillion euro market. There's going to be huge productivity enhancing effects as well. When we think about the kind of sluggishness of the current European economy, there's a real opportunity to turn that around in a very significant way. But there's also that's just on the domestic side, right? There's also the kind of global trade flows, and again, if we have a strongly trustworthy AI, there are all sorts of benefits that can be unlocked. For instance, if we allow for much more systematic and structured commercial planning, if there are stronger cross-border data flows that come about because of the enabling effects of AI, then what can happen is we revolutionize the way trade flows are starting to happen. But there's also a safety aspect. Right? This is not just about commerce at the expense of our safety and security. We are dealing with a technology that can enhance resilience, that can enhance the ways in which we protect our data systems. And this means that a good set of AI systems can make Europe significantly safer. It will have effects on cybersecurity. It will have effects on how we detect and monitor, as well as deal with disinformation and misinformation. There'll be effects on counterterrorism as well, right? Which is an old problem that's not going to go away anytime soon. And all of this means that, given that we are dealing with a war on the union's very doorstep, there are significant safety impacts as well. And then finally, I thought it's useful to talk a bit about our societies, right? Societies can become more scientifically literate, more engaged in the defining issues of the day through the use of artificial intelligence. And both young Europeans and young people globally, I think, if we use AI well, can have a much stronger sense of the possibilities and risks ahead. They will see not just their parts to manage the risks, but their parts in maximizing the possibility space. And I think this can have a significantly empowering effect.
So I think I speak for everyone listening to this that the benefits and also the importance of tackling artificial intelligence are there. The Commission should look very seriously into hiring you as the next spokesperson for this CERN for AI. You convinced me at least.
That's good to know. That's one more than I had yesterday. So I'm very happy about that.
You got my vote. But so let's talk about why a CERN for AI. So assuming that, okay, the Commission wants to tackle artificial intelligence, this could have taken a whole number of different ways. They could have a commissioner for artificial intelligence. They could have created a DG, an agency, you name it. However, von der Leyen is very keen on calling it a CERN for AI. So why would this be the winning approach?
Yeah, that's a really powerful question because you're quite right. This could have taken any number of organizational forms. What CERN has at its core, I think, right, the spirit and ethos of CERN is that it is an ambitious, public driven approach that includes various aspects of fundamental technology and scientific research. But it also brings in the private sector as a partner where that's most useful. So, given the kind of scale of investment that we need, we don't just want this to be led in a bureaucratic way by traditional government agencies. Those are important on many different existing sets of issues. But on something like AI, where you want to really benefit from the externalities of coordination, collaboration, and cross pollination, there are failings from a purely private developmental process. So you want to bring world-class talent together, you need to bring a new technological paradigm together, which means that the government needs to form that fundamental public infrastructure or the public goods of where the technological work is going to happen. But then you want to also bring in the private sector, right? They need to participate, they need to bring in applied, commercially driven research where necessary. And something like a CERN-like entity, I think, allows us to benefit from the connections to government structures where those are useful, but it also allows us to bring in the private sector where necessary. And I would add that it's also important to harness and shape informed citizen perspectives. Now, this is not about populist science, right? It's about saying where citizen perspectives are useful, and we do need them to understand some of the daily impacts of what AI can do. You will want to bring those perspectives in as well. So kind of a strong government foundation enhanced by strong private sector perspectives, and then having citizen perspectives come in as well, where relevant and where useful. What you get in total is a very strong multi-stakeholder approach.
So then where would you say that the line has to be drawn on the participation of private sector? Because let's be honest and a bit cynical, their interests are not always aligned with the societal interests. So where would you draw the line between the participation of the private sector to be sure that this CERN for AI is going to serve the needs of the public, of the citizens, of you and me?
No, that's a very important question. And I think that's why the CERN structure is important, right? The center of gravity of this work, I think, must lie in the public good and public value creation that a public-based entity would need. So you want the range, the institutional scale that a government entity can have. What you don't want is the dysfunctions of government setting in, right? Overly intricate bureaucracy, a system whereby there's so many levels of rules and clearance that you don't allow for the flourishing of these technologies. And good government systems always find the right balance, I think, between those. So I think what needs to happen here is that center of gravity must lie in the public value creation that we're looking for. And then once that sense of mission and fundamental purpose is well set, then we know exactly where we want to bring the private sector in on specific issues where they may well have comparative advantages in specific areas of research or specific applications that we want them to undertake.
And we all know that European Union is known for not being bureaucratic at all. So that's going to work great.
Well, that's why you wanted to. CERN has a certain amount of independence, right, from the broader network of bureaucracy. It'll have a fighting chance to be able to develop a much stronger sense of the science-driven approach that we need on these sorts of technologies.
Let's talk more practicalities. What should be the main goal of this new center? If you're talking, what would you say that would be the main outputs of this center? Are we trying to develop a European ChatGPT?
Well, the way I would frame it, we should think of a CERN for AI as doing a few things. It should pioneer the science of a trustworthy general purpose AI. And so let me tell you what I mean by each of those things, right? Pioneer because this is not work that's been done before. There are no templates, there are no blueprints. And so you need that sense of an experimental approach about trying new things. It's pioneering science. It's not just pioneering political structures. It's not just pioneering economic and commercial approaches. It's pioneering the fundamental science. Because when we get that right, there are all sorts of externality effects on the rest of our ecosystems. And what is it that science for? It's for a trustworthy general purpose AI, meaning you want a set of AIs that can be used for a whole range of different functions, not just specific narrow use cases. It may well be developed by specific companies. And you want that to be done in a trustworthy way, right? It has to be AI that we trust, we believe is aligned with fundamental human needs, and there has to be a reasonable amount of assurance that trustworthiness is going to be well maintained. Once you have that in place, right, the pioneering, the science, the trustworthiness, and the general purpose AI, what that can do, right, the overall consequences of it will be to accelerate the development and adoption of AIs across society, right, in ways that create public value. So that, I think, should be the main goal.
Let's talk about money and finances. Of course, something like this, no one would expect it to come cheap. There's quite of a hefty price tag for this center. So ICFT, you are a senior fellow at ICFT. Your proposal, if I can put it this way, your proposal is for 30 to 35 billion euros for the first 3 years to establish this center. We're in a period of transition. The economy has been one of the main concerns of people that went to vote throughout the world this year. There's defense needs, there's climate transition. How can one, again, assuming you're going to be the spokesperson for this new center, what would then be your pitch to justify all this money going to this center?
The first and most important thing is that we can't think about this in a binary way. There are always going to be benefits from AI in a vertical sense, right? So in terms of the specific effects of AI in the digital space, that's what I would call vertical, right? So an AI as a self-contained dimension. But there's also horizontal effects, right? Where AI will affect other dimensions of life, both public life as well as commercial life. And once we think of AI as affecting both the vertical as well as the horizontal, then actually that price tag, right, becomes more understandable. Because what you're really realizing is that investment in something like a CERN for AI is not just an investment in AI alone. It's an investment in every other dimension that AI will touch in a horizontal way. And that means that defense and climate, which are, you're absolutely right? Those are two critical areas for Europe. Those will be developed well, I think, by a trustworthy AI system. So let me give you some examples of this. There are going to be significant resilience enhancing effects from AI. Like I mentioned earlier, cybersecurity, disinformation detection, counterterrorism, all things that are vital in general for security needs, and particularly given the conflicts that Europe is dealing with at the moment. All of those can be enhanced by AI, which means that an investment in a CERN for AI will be an investment in those security enhancements. Similarly, on the climate side, there are things that AI can help to do to ease climate transition, to counter some of the adverse impacts that other technologies have on the environment. And the CERN for AI should therefore be prioritizing research that mitigates some of the current high electricity and water and other energy demands on the development and deployment of cutting edge AI models. So if we do that well, there's going to be a significant climate effect as well. And I think once you think about it in those terms, then you realize that this is a price tag across many different things that benefit all of our societies and our economies, not just AI in an isolated way.
What do you foresee are the biggest challenges in setting up this European AI Research Council?
This is a really important question. I think one important thing here is that we need to start developing it quickly, right? There are benefits from agility. There are benefits from the kind of responsiveness and flexibility that such a structure can have. And you alluded to this earlier, right, Catarina? Europe is not known for setting up bodies and entities in a fast and agile way. So that will be one challenge. But I think what's encouraging for me, and I will declare this, right? I mean, I am an optimist. I like to believe that the glasses out there are half full rather than half empty. And I think in this case, there's good evidence for it because we've seen that there is strong political will behind the initiative, and that provides some amount of hope. When you think about similar initiatives that tried to achieve technological breakthrough, like the European High Performance Computing Joint Undertaking, that became operational just about 10 months after its commission proposal, which in the greater scheme of technological adoption is not significantly long time. So I think speed will be a challenge, but it's one I'm quite hopeful about. Funding, of course, will be critical. You can't develop cutting edge, trustworthy AI without the sufficient investment in computers and hardware and infrastructure, as well as talent. And so one significant challenge will be if we underinvest, right? It means we will end up, I think, getting rendered to laggards, right? Or minimally at least second tier in the global AI supply chain. And again, I think there are reasons to be relatively optimistic that this challenge can be managed, not removed entirely, but it can be managed, right? Because if you have investments in the EU's tech sovereignty, then those can actually help us to cement some of the technological needs that we actually require here. Those are two quite important ones, right? The speed of starting, the funding and resources that we might need. Ultimately, I think what also will become important is how to balance the multiple areas and potentially competing priorities that will exist in this work. We will need agility, as I mentioned earlier. We will need an entity like this to have scientific independence and autonomy. We will want to have sufficient public oversight so that we're accountable to European citizens. We will need to make sure that things are commercially viable where necessary, and that things are scientifically rigorous, not just independent. And when you put all of that together, that's hard work. But it means that an entity like a CERN for AI will need the right kind of governance structure. And that's not an easy one to define, which is why our upcoming report actually explores some of the details, right, on how we can thread this very delicate and very fine balance. The most worthwhile things will take time and effort. And we believe that finding the right effort to get this balance right is worthwhile.
I want to stay with something that you just said, that it would have to be commercially viable. Why is that?
No, what I meant was that the effects coming out of AI will have to have certain amounts of commercial uses to them. Right? You want to have certain sets of foundational models that are important because they are kind of research for researchers' sake. And ultimately, some of those will want to move into the realm of commerce. Some will want to move into use cases that affect society. Some will maybe have public sector applications. And when you put those together, then you have a nice, robust set of a product mix.
Mm-hmm. As you said at the start, this is not the opportunity for Europe to get its act together, but it's an opportunity for Europe to get on the race, the tech race. But why is it that Europe is lagging behind the US and even China on artificial intelligence? Is it a matter that we are 27 nations working together? Does it only boil down to investments and the other ones are just, putting more money than we are? What difference can this research council make?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And being 27 markets, it can be what we want it to be, right? It can be a problem. It can also be a source of significant agglomeration and scale economies that provide a huge amount of advantage. So you mentioned investment. I think it's partly about investment, but it's also a bit about the broader ecology within which that investment occurs. Just as an example, it is true, I think, that the US and China invested earlier in a more ambitious way and also created the right market conditions, right? They created conditions within which there was an ecology where AI could thrive, which meant that, of course, key firms in the semiconductor supply chain, as well as those involved in AI development, got significant government support in both the US and China, in different ways, of course, because these are very different balances of market and state intervention. But both of them got that amount of support. What you notice when you see the Chinese and American examples is they also have a very coherent, or much more coherent, internal investment environment, right? They have policies that are friendlier to the overall undertaking of such investments. And this means that the overall ecology is much more salubrious to the development of good, solid AI. And what's interesting is that this CERN-like structure can actually address both the investment and the ecology aspects that I've mentioned. It'll be an important way to spearhead the EU's efforts to inspire a culture and political will to address the sorts of structural challenges that have been standing in the way of doing more work in AI. What also happens is when you bring the single market together, this is where the 27 economies becomes an advantage, right? If you can reform an overly punitive and red tape heavy system, and we can then push for underpinning initiatives like a European Data Union strategy, that's when the ecology starts to come alive, right? Where you have an ecology that inputs into the AI system. The AI system then uses the new factors of production, not just land, labor, and capital, but data and talent as well. And then you come out with much more successful outputs at the end. But it really is about investment as well as a broader ecology and environment that is going to be positive and conducive to the development of AI.
I want to finish with the question on competitiveness. I think Mario Draghi is in everyone's minds and hearts and souls during these months. How can the EU, Europe compete with the private sector or even other nations? Just talked about the US and China in attracting top AI talent. In an op-ed that ICFJ wrote, ICFJ pointed out that the issue, that this discrepancy between the salaries that someone in the private sector can make, 6-7 figures in the private sector compared to what European Union can offer, which, let's be honest, it's not low salaries usually. But in any case, how can the EU become competitive?
I think the important thing here is that Europe has to play a game on its own terms, right, and not try and be the private sector. And what I mean by this is talent looks for a few things when it decides where to go. Money is part of it, but money is a hygiene factor. If there's enough of it, you will attract talent. Beyond a certain point, multiplying a salary by a certain number is not going to get you that same multiple of talent. So apart from salary, what are people looking for? They're looking for meaningful, substantive work that they know is going to be useful and important. And half of the attraction of the private sector actually is this. It's not just salaries. It's also knowing that if you design an app for Google, or if you do something for Apple, or if you do something for Meta, you are going to have a huge global market and the potential for a very meaningful amount of impact. So that's one part of it. A second thing that talent looks for is mentorship, learning opportunities, right? A space where they know if they go, they will get better at what they are doing. They will hone their craft. And this is why there's a lot of a virtuous cycle with talent, right? If you have good talent, you will get more good talent. But there's also a vicious cycle. If you have no good talent, you won't get any good talent, and it becomes self-perpetuating. And both of these, right, the meaningful substantive work as well as the mentorship and learning opportunities add up to a culture of learning, of experimentation, of vision and agility. And when you put these together, these can be really attractive for talent that is looking for meaningful and interesting work. And this is why I think something like a CERN for AI becomes really important, because it can offer those three things in quite a significant amount. It can offer world-class computing infrastructure, the same way the existing CERN, right, the original CERN attracted at one point about 70% of the world's particle physicists who work there. Right, the world's best know that they want to go to CERN in order to be able to do good work. And so we need the same sort of underpinning infrastructure and equipment for AI. So that ambitious, high impact research that isn't possible in pure academic settings or even purely in industry can happen in a space like this. Now, how do we do this, right? That's the question. How do we make sure that that infrastructure is there so that the meaningful work, the culture, and the mentorship and learning opportunities can be realized? The EU can compete, I think, if it creates an unlikely but nonetheless unique public-private coalition. And this means you're pooling resources. That's a big part of this whole process. But the partnership can also tap into the private sector's development, their commercial expertise and knowledge, and balance that with the public sector's long-term drive towards social good, right? This is what I mentioned earlier, the importance of scale and the creation of public value. And again, what's going to be really important here is how we govern an outfit like this. What is going to be the organizational structure and the corporate governance of this entity? Thankfully, there are legal structures that allow for this sort of optimal coordination, which, on the one hand, avoid public sector's common dysfunctions and allow it to also innovate, right, while avoiding problems like low wages and bureaucratic inertia.
You did say you were a very positive person, but so you truly feel that the CERN for AI has at least the potential to compete with the Metas and the Open AIs of this world?
Like I said, I don't know if it's about competition. I think it's about setting a new definition to what it means to be playing the AI game. We can do this in ways that benefit short-term commercial prioritization, or we can say that we want to find ways to make this a general purpose technology that defines how we live for the next 20 to 30 years. And we did that with nuclear power, right? We found a way to say there are going to be commercial applications, but there are some fundamental philosophies that we want to also use here that have to do with the importance of science, the importance of collaboration, and the importance of that sense of public ambition and vision. So I don't think it's about competition. I think it's about really crafting a new game here and crafting a new game in ways that encourage the best and brightest of the world to come and be part of this process.
Okay, I think you can definitely use this conversation to apply for a job as spokesperson for CERN for AI. Aaron, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Do my best, yeah. Thanks for having me. Really good fun.
Thank you.
And that's it for today's show. I'm Catarina Vila Nova, and Policy Voices will be back again next week. Until then, goodbye.